Welcome, everyone, to the 7 software asset management secrets that could keep you out of trouble. I'm Lyria Charles, your moderator for today, and our guest today is Avis Yates Rivers, who is the CEO of Technology Concepts Group International. Before we get started today, a few things. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been in the IT industry for 15 or 20 years, with the last 10 years or so in executive IT leadership roles. I am the Chief of Staff at Technology Concepts Group, where I report to Avis Yates Rivers. And I'm really thrilled and happy to be here today because I know there's been a lot of conversation around the whole topic of software asset management. And so we have an expert that's going to share some really keen secrets with you today. But before we get started, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. We'd like this session to be informal, so we don't want to just be espousing a lot of information. We really want you to participate by either asking a question or adding to the conversation with a comment about your own experience with software asset management. We'll stay on the line after the call in case we can't get to everyone's call during the allotted time. This webinar is being recorded, however, so you will be able to play it back at your own convenience. And you're going to receive a link to the recording and the handouts, these slides, after the call is done. As a good housekeeping rule, it's good to shut down any unnecessary apps that you might have running in the background, just so there's no technical difficulties that would prevent you from enjoying this webinar. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Avis Yates Rivers. Avis is a 30-year technology entrepreneur. She has deep expertise in the whole software asset management and IT procurement arenas. Avis is a strong advocate of supplier diversity in corporate America and believes that bringing diversity to the whole supply chain really helps to innovate corporations. Avis was named as the White House Champion of Change in Software Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, and she's a national spokesperson for NCWIT, where she has a mission and passion to increase the participation of women and people of color in designing the technology of the future. Avis, I want to thank you for being here today, and we're really anxious to hear about how companies out there can be more effective with managing their software assets.
Well, I am delighted to be here, Lyria, and thank you for that kind introduction. You know, software asset management is critically important to the health and well-being of every organization. And there's been a lot of attention being paid to it as of late. And this has really been since the Great Recession that we all lived through. So what I want to do right now is to do some level setting and make sure that I convey to you why this is so important. First of all, what is software asset management? And we'll call it SAM. SAM is actually a business practice, right? It's not a program, it's not an office, it's not a group of people, but it is actually a business practice that should be introduced and managed throughout every organization. It involves managing and optimizing the purchase, the deployment, the maintenance, the utilization, and the disposal of your software application. So it's the full life cycle that's being managed as a business practice. And why that is so critical is because software is typically either the first or second largest categories of spend of the entire IT budget. And of that spend, 50 to 60% of it is spent on maintenance. So it's important that you're not only managing your licenses, but you're doing that in light of how is that impacting your maintenance and making sure that you don't forget about that, because that is where a lot of cost bleeds out of an organization. So if done correctly, a typical savings that you can think of for an effective SAM practice is roughly 20 to 25% if it's managed effectively. 20 to 25% of your largest IT spend category can be significant depending upon the size of your IT budget. And what I'm finding out here in the marketplace is that most companies just don't have a full visibility into what software is being used in their own organization or how that software is being used. So it's a big problem for sure. It requires resources and effort to solve, but the return on investment is quick and it's sure. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So this is an industry standard maturity model. You'll see that the levels 1 and 2 are in gray because these are the two levels that is typically affiliated with SAM. That's your traditional software asset management, where in level 1, you know what you have. You've been able to identify both your hardware and your software assets on your network. And number 2, you've been able to reconcile what you've purchased against what's actually installed. However, this is on an ad hoc basis, or it's a snapshot or a point in time. It's not a continuous look at your licenses and contracts, because after you figure that part out, 5 minutes later, it could be totally different without your knowledge. And so that's your traditional SAM. But it's when you start moving up the maturity model into the blue areas, now you're starting to really optimize because you've employed automation, which is going to help you with the reconciliations, right? So level 3 we call continuously compliant, and that is where you automate the entitlement versus your consumption of licenses. And it's here where you have implemented some SAM processes to help you automatically manage contracts and maintain this state of continuous compliance. And then at level 4, you're fully optimized. You have automated even more of your processes, and you can begin to optimize a little bit more of your portfolio while minimizing your license consumption and your software spend. And so we'll talk about all of those 4 levels and show it to you in a different view on this next slide. So here again, you can see that levels 1 and 2 are outlined by a yellow dotted line. Again, your traditional SAM levels of maturity. Where are your assets deployed, right? So you can know how to assess your installed assets. You know what you have. And then at level 2, you understand how those assets are being used, right? But again, it's a point in time, and it's here where you begin to leverage maybe an application recognition library in your understanding of how your licenses are being used. But again, same as on the prior model, when you continue up to level 3 and you start looking at continuous compliance, now this is where you have begun to implement some automation. You've established some governance. You're working with a SKU library because each of your assets does come with a SKU number, just like a can of corn, right? And understanding how that license is being utilized compared to how it was contracted to be utilized is much more accessible by utilizing a SKU library. So that's part of that automation. And then again, up to level 4 is where you're now looking at the automated product use rights library. And this is where you begin to really manage and reclaim unused licenses at all times, minimizing your spend. And this is where you can begin to really see some optimization of your investment in software. So at this point, we want to move to the next slide and take a look at the stakeholders and why it's important to them.
Well, before we do that, Avis, why don't we do a quick poll? I'd like to ask a couple of questions and make sure everyone is awake out there.
Okay.
Our first poll is going to be about that maturity model that you talked about earlier. And I want to ask the audience to just take a moment Only Avis and I can see your responses, so you can answer honestly. But how would you rate your company's current maturity in the software asset management arena? Are you at level 1 where your installation is assessed? Maybe you're at level 2 where you've got some progress being made in understanding how you're using your software. Are you level 3 where you're into that upper realm of using automation to help with your continuous compliance? Or maybe you might be at level 4 where you feel like you really have optimized as much as you can. So quickly, I'd like for everyone just to take one vote, and I do see the votes coming in. And it looks like about 40–50% of our audience has voted at this point. We have most of the votes showing up between, oh, really, levels 1 and levels 2, with most of them being level 2. We have just one person, again, we're almost at 80% of the people voting. One person coming in saying they're optimized. They've pretty much done it all. But again,
Absolutely.
now that everyone has voted, Avis, it looks like at least 80% of our audience is between level 1 and level 2, with the bulk of those being at maturity level 1. Does that surprise you?
Oh, not at all. That's what I see every day. And that's very typical in the marketplace today as companies are striving to take a more proactive role in managing their software. So that's great. That's a great poll to take.
Okay, so I've got
Mhm.
one more poll and then we'll get back to your presentation, Avis. So
Okay.
given that most people said that they're at levels 1 or 2, what's holding you back, folks out there? What's holding you back from reaching, that next level up? Is it a matter of time, or maybe budget, or is it expertise? Maybe you don't have the expertise in-house, or maybe it's a combination of all of the above. Again, just like before, please cast your vote, and we'll give them a few seconds to do that, Avis.
Okay.
It looks like, people are voting. Most of them are saying a combination of all of the above. It
Mm-hmm.
looks like time, expertise, and budget are kind of trending at the same pace together. However, it still looks like all of the above. And it looks like everyone has voted at this point. And Avis, the results are in. It looks like over 70% of the people are saying a combination of all of the above. Again, are you surprised?
Not at all. That's very, very typical. This is an area, and this is why people are at level 1 because everyone's busy. Everyone's busy doing their job, and this is yet another thing that can't be done um, effectively if you don't have the proper expertise and tools and time to get it done. So that's very typical. It's what we see out there all the time.
And
Hmm.
Avis, I do have a question on the dashboard, which is probably a good place to take it right now, because it does
Okay.
concern the maturity model. They're asking, when you displayed the SAM maturity model, what is the biggest point of change between levels 2 and level 3?
Oh, good question, but it's a very easy answer, and that is automation.
Mm.
You cannot utilize static tools like spreadsheets and other static tools to achieve a state of continuous compliance. You have to utilize the proper automation. So that's the biggest difference that you'll see between steps 2 and 3. Mhm.
Okay. Well, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay. And so what I've done here is put together for you a stakeholders chart. Because when you are working in a corporate environment, you can't just go off and do what you'd like to do. Oh, no, no, no. You need to be able to defend your position. You need to be able to seek the resources that you will need to do this job effectively. So understanding what's important to the C-suite senior executives will help you to do that. And so if you take a look across, I identify the stakeholder and their orientation. Are they strategic in their view or are they tactical? And I look at what is their motivation or focus. What's their value position? I identify some particular components like risk management, cost savings, or cost avoidance, and identify any particular concerns that they may have. So let's just take one of these stakeholders. Let's take that CIO. and understand what their positioning is. And so she is both tactical and strategic, right? She's responsible for setting the direction and the strategy for the IT organization, but she's also responsible for making sure that it's implemented and that things get done. So that's why the CIO has a dual orientation. And her biggest motivation is protecting that IT budget and doing more with less. And so unanticipated and unbudgeted events, like we'll see later on in the presentation, will not sit well with the CIO and need to be avoided at all costs, right? Because she's interested in improving the delivery of IT and enhancing IT's value to the rest of the organization, right? And she's got to do that with either cost savings or cost avoidance. But the biggest concern is, how can asset management assist me in optimizing my IT budget? And if you can answer those questions for your CIO, you'll be in a much stronger position. And the same holds true for the CEO, the COO, the chief procurement officer, or the general counsel. They all have their interests, they all have their concerns, and this chart will provide you with a little bit of knowledge about what each of them are going to be interested in. So hopefully this will help you when you're making your presentations internally.
Well, I love this chart, Avis, because you can see at a snapshot what's really important, what's the driver for each of these, executives. And if one of the participants on the phone wanted to actually take the next step, they know how they need to put their package together to address the concerns for each of these executives.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so Avis, we are ready for those secrets.
Well, this is the part of the program that I've been anxiously waiting for, and I know you have been too out there. So the secrets I have posed as questions, because I want you to ask yourself these questions, as well as go back and ask your internal organization these questions. So, and they're in no particular order. So the first secret is your license reconciliation accurate? And is it automated? So what is license reconciliation? It's when you compare what you've purchased against what you're consuming or how you're consuming your licenses. Understanding the number of available licenses that you have in your organization allows you to make critical procurement decisions and not to overspend. It also allows you to reduce your ongoing software maintenance. That is a huge part of the IT budget. And anything that you can do to reduce maintenance is going to yield tremendous dividends. Managing this and doing manual calculations with a spreadsheet is exceedingly difficult. In fact, I say it's impossible. It's impossible to have a snapshot provide you with the only picture of your organization and how you're reconciling your licenses. It's a really big red flag. So is your license reconciliation accurate this minute? What about 20 minutes from now, when changes are being made in your organization that you have no visibility into?
And
So,
Avis, when we were talking about this earlier, and I was asking you, what percentage do you think companies out there are using some form of spreadsheet management for their software asset management?
98%.
Oh,
I mean, this is the tool of choice. This is what folks are using, which is why there's so much attention being placed on this, because they're increasingly realizing that they just have to keep adding more people and more people and more spreadsheets, and the complex hybrid IT environments of today certainly will not lend itself to this type of reconciliation when you factor in desktop, data center, mobile, cloud, virtual. There's such a hybrid and a mixture of types of assets that it's impossible to manage on
yeah.
spreadsheets, but people still do it. So That leads me to secret number 2. Are you recycling your organization's licenses? And by recycling, I mean, do you have a process in place to return licenses that are available from either people or machines leaving the organization back into your license pool? License recycling salvages surplus licenses so that you do not have to buy more in the event that there are more licenses needed. And it also stops the maintenance that you're paying for unused licenses. This is a huge hole that money just runs out of in an organization. So if you're not recycling your licenses, then you're overspending. And secret number 3 is, are your licenses product use rights compliant? And so product use rights are basically the terms and conditions that you agree to on how you can use each license. And so you have to ensure that you're not violating your product use rights, because independent software vendors are very focused on protecting their intellectual property. But there are some favorable product use rights that you should be applying, such as upgrade rights, downgrade rights, multiple use rights. Can you use the same license on your desktop, your laptop, your tablet, and your mobile phone? Can you reuse the same license, or are you constantly buying these devices with new licenses associated with them? So are you compliant? If not, you are at risk for penalties and fines, and this is another huge hole. And we talked about the CIO and her protecting her IT budget. These penalties and these fines, I can guarantee you, have not been budgeted for. And so this is going to be a critical factor in the CIO being successful in protecting her budget. So you have to be very careful on making sure that you're compliant with how you can utilize these licenses. And guess what? Every software vendor's licenses, product use rights are different, and they're ever changing. So
Yeah, and I would imagine, Avis, with so many mobile devices available to us now, that this is just going to get even more complex in the future.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a big one. So that takes me to secret number 4. Are you prepared for your next audit, renewal, or true up? So these are what we call events in the industry, and this is where we begin to get the most of our calls from companies, because they have been notified by a software vendor that they are next up for an audit. These audits were a way to captivate and capture additional revenue streams during the recession when new buying was down. Auditing customers is, again, a way that the ISVs protect their intellectual property, but it's also a way that they generate additional revenue. And for the customers, it's unbudgeted, it's unanticipated, it's unexpected, and therefore it's not a good scenario to be in. So you have very little negotiating power during an audit, nor do you have good buying power during this process, because you will be buying, if you're found to be under or non-compliant because you don't have enough licenses, you'll be buying at full list price during this period. So are you prepared? Renewals and true-ups happen every year, or whenever that period of time is, 1 to 3 years. You have to be prepared. You have to have a defensible position that you can put your stake in the ground and say, we know we're compliant, and this is why. So if not, you're at risk for unbudgeted penalties and fines.
Yes, an audit. When we were talking about audits, Avis, earlier, you were saying how, because of the recession, independent software vendors were realizing that this is a source of revenue for them now, and now it's just become one of their line items on their budget.
That's right. That's right. And even though the recession has ended, the audits have not. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to be prepared for that.
Yes. So Avis, to let you catch your breath for a moment, why don't we stop here and see if there are any questions on the dashboard? And in fact, I do see at least one question out there. It says the cloud is helping their company's productivity, but their license management is becoming a compliance nightmare. How can SAM help them address these cloud-related license issues?
Oh, you know what, Lyria, that is an excellent question. And the answer is the same way that it protects your physical assets. And so when I talked about a hybrid environment, you know, many organizations have availed themselves of virtualization, and now many more are availing themselves of cloud or software in the cloud and not actually purchasing licenses, but purchasing subscriptions to those. But the same compliance rules apply. You have to make sure that you are utilizing or consuming these licenses, whether they're in the cloud or whether they're on your premises, in a way that is in accordance with the product use rights and the
Mm-hmm.
terms and conditions that you signed for. So the fact that they're not physically there really does not make that big of a difference. They still must be managed with an effective SAM process.
Okay. Well, I think we're ready to move on to secret number 5.
All right, secret number 5. Are you harvesting existing licenses? Now, license harvesting means that you are removing unused software from current machines as opposed to recycling when you were salvaging licenses from machines or from users that were no longer part of the organization. In this case, you are able to see how users are consuming their licenses. So you notice that everyone has been given the professional version of Visio. I don't know, it was just became part of the standard image. Well, you recognize that 40% of your user community hasn't opened Visio in the last 6 to 12 months. So they're not using it. And you determine what constitutes an opening or a usage of it, but you can see that users are not using Visio. You're paying for that level of that version of professional Visio. So number one, you're wasting money because they don't need it, and so they're not using it. And number two, you're paying for maintenance on these licenses that are not being utilized. So what you want to do is to be able to reclaim those licenses. Let your users know that we see that you've not had the need to utilize Visio in the last 9 months. And so we're going to harvest that. We're going to pull that back. But be assured, if your situation changes and you see the need that you're going to begin to use it, just let us know and we'll be happy to reinstall it on your device. But by bringing back or reharvesting those licenses, you then again don't have to buy new licenses for new users who need them and paying additional maintenance for new licenses when you can utilize those that are in existence but not being consumed. So that's a harvesting. And if you're not reharvesting, you are most definitely overspending.
So Avis, I'm sure for many companies out there to do this kind of harvesting, it makes sense, right? It just makes sense.
Sure.
But there's probably a culture change that has to go along with this because, I have my Visio on my desktop, so what? It's my license. It's my business that I haven't opened it in the last 6 months. How do you address this?
You know, this is going to come from educating your user community, instilling in your users that you are an organization that wants to be known for sustainability and wants to minimize waste. And whether it's software licenses or plastic water bottles, you're trying to minimize that waste. And so I think the users would it would resonate. That message would resonate with the users, also assuring them that you don't need it now. You may need it next year, and we'll be happy to avail it back to you next year. But let's minimize, all of us, minimize our waste so we can become a leaner, more profitable, less expensive organization and to do business within our organization. And I think that it will resonate with your users. Culture changes is not easy. It takes time. But the users have to be assured that they're not being penalized and that this is not a case of Big Brother watching every move we make. And there are ways to do that effectively. We help organizations with that.
Okay. Moving on then to secret number 6.
Secret number 6. Do you give your users the ability to purchase and install software on their own? Well, I am not talking about providing an applications portal to allow your user community to help themselves, to self-serve, if you will, because I am very much a big proponent of that. What I'm talking about here is rogue buying. It's buying and downloading software external to all of the processes that you may have in place. And what happens in this case, again, is the user community may not be educated to the point of how disruptive that can be or how dangerous that can be when they download software that might cause a conflict in your infrastructure configuration, or it causes compliance issues, or they're downloading something that IT cannot support. And so there will be support issues, or vendors come and they go. They disappear, new software vendors. And so not being able to continue to receive updated versions and newer versions and support from the software vendors as time progresses. All of these are issues that can be accelerated with rogue buying. And so here again, you want to educate your user community on the dangers of this practice. And you want to make sure that it doesn't cause any conflicts in configuration, and you don't put an added burden on IT because you might need support on that unsupported product. So if you do give your users the ability to purchase and install software on their own, you may be encountering some unnecessary support and potentially some unnecessary security issues. So be careful with that.
Okay, Avis, we are to secret number 7.
Wow, have we gotten here already?
Yep.
Okay, well, this has gone faster than I anticipated. But secret number 7 is, are you performing software rationalization? And by that I mean, are you categorizing and cataloging your software by business function? Because if you do that, you will increase your overall buying power and you'll better understand your software portfolio. So there are a lot of good outcomes to performing software rationalization. But Lyria, you and I were talking about software rationalization recently, and this was a project that you actually owned at another company that you worked for years and years ago. Can you share with our audience your experience with software rationalization?
So, sure, Avis, thank you. Some years ago, I headed up an initiative to, at the time, our intent was to look at what risk we were facing with old or outdated or unsupported technologies. We knew we had a lot of it out there in our mainframe world and in our desktop client server world, but we weren't sure how much or where it lived. But the surprising thing is through this study, what we discovered was that not only did we have a lot of this stuff out there, but we had multiple versions. And a lot of those versions weren't supported. So a case in point was with Adobe PDF. Well, we knew we had Adobe PDF running on people's desktops that they use to, take their Word document or whatever and convert it to Adobe PDF format. What we didn't realize was how much that we had been exposed to within our custom built applications, that from inside the applications we're creating PDF documents. So not only did we have a lot of old versions, we came up with like 12 different versions of old PDF, Adobe PDF, but we also realized we weren't licensed.
Wow.
We weren't licensed. And so, it's good that we found out what we did when we did. We made ourselves whole and got ourselves, legal, but that could have been a major problem for us.
Wow, you're absolutely right. That's scary. It's a good thing you went through that practice, even if it was for a different anticipated outcome. It really did arm you with some very important information that you could act on.
Absolutely.
So if you are not performing your software rationalization, you are at risk. So I would strongly recommend that you do that. So, we all avail ourselves of information from Gartner. They are a very good objective source of information in the information technology industry. Let's hear what Gartner has to say or advise on effective IT asset management. And this quote is directly from them. They say that this practice enables companies to produce a visible and dependable account of their IT asset costs and risks, and that the flow of asset management costs and financial information into IT financial management programs enables companies to make IT sourcing, funding, and architectural decisions from a business perspective. And that's missing in a lot of IT organizations today. And Gartner goes on to say that companies who successfully execute an effective ITAM as a discipline has typically achieved up to 30% of cost savings in the first year. 30%. And that's not the end of that good news. But these companies have continued to achieve at least 5% of cost savings every year for the next 5 subsequent years. And so when I talked about early on that this effective practice could yield a rapid and sure return on investment, this is what it's being based on. Because we understand where the low-hanging fruit is. We know where to go and look for practices or the lack of processes that can immediately begin reaping cost savings. We know where those are.
And so, Avis, this ties back into what you were saying earlier, that this is where that self-funding mechanism comes in, right here. This is where it starts.
Absolutely, because the investment that you make in technology tools and processes and the right expertise and the time to put this in place, you can see the benefits that you can reap from it in its first year. So it's not an investment that's going to take years to give you a return on it. And factor in the point I made very early on in this discussion that that software captures either the largest or the second largest line of an IT budget. 30% of that in cost savings is dramatic, and it's significant. And of course, results will differ depending upon an organization, but it's a very healthy goal to reach for. And that makes this a very crucial discipline to master.
Takes us in actually to our last segment of today's webinar, and that is to answer your questions. Let's see, the first one saying, how long would this assessment take? How long would you expect the assessment to take, Avis?
That's a good question, and it really just does depend on how much information you have available to you, because we begin the assessment by sending to you a pretty detailed questionnaire. And again, the questionnaire is going to ask you for information that hopefully you have available to you, or you know where to find. And so the quicker you can get that survey back to us is when we then begin to really analyze and massage that information and come out with your assessment and your recommendations. And so we're talking weeks here, not months, because it is a baseline assessment. And so it doesn't take very long, but it is dependent upon the level of completeness that you're able to turn that survey back around to us.
Okay, and then there's a follow-up I think would make sense as well to ask you about, and they're asking what kind of manpower, what kind of support would you need from them to do this assessment? Like, does everyone in the company need to be part of it if they're in procurement, or just how does this work?
And the answer to that, again, is it depends on each company, but in general, it is usually a person who has been tasked with managing their software license assets. You're either doing it currently in a manual fashion via spreadsheets, you're utilizing one of the multiple discovery tools that are available in the marketplace today. And so you have a lot of the information at your fingertips, or someone does within the organization. It certainly doesn't require a big group. It really is going to be the person in IT or in procurement who is tasked with keeping an eye on this area of software asset management.
Okay, we'll be looking forward to future webinars.
Well, please stay tuned. Stay connected with us. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. But please stay connected and because we are blogging, so you'll want to come back to our website again and again and see and avail yourself of all of the information and ebooks and white papers and articles that can be found in our reference library. So again, it's www.technologyconcepts.com. We look forward to engaging with you, and have a good day.
All right. And with that, thank you, Avis, and thank you, everyone, for being so attentive during this call. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.